Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for our third and final installment of our data protection webinar mini-series. We are joined today by Daniel Avinir and Lauren Van Der Byl. If you are new here, just a quick intro about who we are and what we do. Legalese is a creative legal agency. We specialize in four core areas of law, namely labor law, IP protection, data and regulations, as well as commercial law. And we are joined by Lauren Van Der Byl, our head of data and regulations, making her the perfect person to chat to us about this topic. And then we are joined by Daniel Avinir. Daniel is the co-founder and CEO of Solid Systems. Solid is provides human-centric technology management, cybersecurity, and guidance to businesses in South Africa and the UK. So we are doing practical tips and best practices today. Daniel, why don't you kick us off with your first best practice?
Great. Thanks very much, Serene. I'm a little bit upset that this series is coming to an end. Had a lot of fun with you, Lauren. So let's kick off. And I think last week we spoke, I talked about an onion of protection with different layers and layers and layers. But what's so interesting about these so many different layers and complexity is that the truth is that there are some really high impact practices, both on the cyber side and on the legal side, that if you practice, reduces your risk significantly. And we're going to be talking about those today. So between Lauren and I, we're going to share the 3 top high impact practices that you can do in your business, both on the cyber side and on the legal. So I'll kick us off, Lauren. Are you ready?
Perfect. Yep.
I'll kick us off. The first one is all about the humans in your life and the humans in your business. And what do I mean by that? That it's quite one of the easiest high impact practices, and that's really staying up to date, training and getting and keeping up to date with the latest threats. Threats are changing all the time, and they're becoming more and more sophisticated. I mean, we all know how cool ChatGPT is, but did you know that ChatGPT itself is coming up with new ways for hackers? I mean, there's a recent hack that is so interesting. It was a credit controller transferred $25 million to a hacker. Like you think about that. I mean, who even has access to that information, that amount of money? And the story goes that he joined a Zoom call, and his boss and his other colleagues were all on the call, and he gave him permission to transfer $25 million to a attacker. And what actually happened, what they found out is the whole thing was staged. The Zoom call and all his colleagues that were on the call were deep fakes. And so this really shows how sophisticated things are and how sophisticated these attacks are, and also how you need to stay up to date. And so companies like ours provide ongoing cybersecurity awareness training for users. We also provide like phishing simulations, and that type of service in your business. Make sure that there's continuous reinforcement, and all the new attacks and things to look out for are brought to your employees' attention. So that's my number one. Over to you, Lauren. What have you got for us?
Perfect. Your number one leads directly into my number one, and that is the importance of undertaking breach drills or security compromise drills, or whatever you want to call it, but essentially practice runs, which is a service that Solid does. So the way I want to relate it is that in the same way that we undertake fire and safety drills with our employees, with our staff, with our business, so should we undertake breach drills. By practicing what to do in a potential or current data breach or security compromise, you save yourself trauma and panic and stress. As a business, breach drills are very important because they ensure that you preemptively identify weaknesses. So whether you do this yourself or through a service provider like Daniel, it helps you to improve your team's coordination, right? So we said in our previous session, it's of no use having a policy if you've never learned about it, read it, or understand what it means. And so by doing a drill, you improve the team's coordination so everyone knows who to contact, what to do, and what needs to happen next. And that also improves and enhances your compliance, both from my perspective, being legal compliance, and also from Daniel's perspective, being cybersecurity compliance. And an important example of this that is in a South African context is our favorite, the Department of Justice, in that it was one of the first fines that were ever issued under POCPIO because the Department of Justice actually failed to maintain its cybersecurity standards. And in that regard, it failed to implement its compliance requirements under POPIA. And unfortunately, because it never sought to fix these changes or to constantly upgrade them or look at them, it unfortunately received a fine because it was non-compliant with the law, which just shows the importance of, one, keeping up to date, and two, practicing that breach rule. So when it does happen, you know what to do.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much irony in that example. Thanks
Completely.
very much, Lauren. Number two, high impact practice I want to talk about is our digital identities. When I talk about digital identities, I'm really just talking about your logins, your logins and passwords. And I think we need to change and shift our thinking around them. Some people think logins like Airbnb or your Instagram account or some account that you don't think has any information in it doesn't need to be protected. But I'm here to tell you that it does, and I'll tell you why. But before I do, I want you to think about these digital identities as a passport. You know how important that document is when you go overseas? It's the document you keep like really close. That's how we should be thinking about our digital identities. And so why? Why does it matter if someone breaks into your Airbnb account or your Facebook account or some personal account that doesn't contain any company information? And the reason is often hackers use information gathered in places that you wouldn't expect to create a sophisticated attack to trick you in some way. So it's not just services like your Microsoft account or your Google that should be protected. Because and maybe another way to like think about this is like, you know, when someone does a magic trick for you and you see that magic trick and you don't know how it works and you look at it and you're like, whoa, that's incredibly impressive. But if you had known how it works, or if they tell you afterwards how the magic trick works, you're like, oh, okay, there was sleight of hand, or he knew something and I didn't know he knew. And so it becomes a lot clearer. And cyber attacks can often be like that. So how do you protect yourself? Well, the easiest way, which really does significantly reduce your risk, is by simply using two-factor authentication. So many of you know what that is. Some of you might not. It's when a code gets sent to your cell phone either via SMS, which is the less secure way, or through the Authenticator app, which is a more secure way. And wherever and the hack and the high impact practice is to make sure that wherever there is an offer to enable two-factor authentication, which is available now in most services, enable it. Have your authenticator ready and enable it, because that is going to stop people stealing usernames and passwords and reusing them without your permission. So that is my number two, high impact practice. What have you got for us, Lauren?
Perfect. Once again, mine leads directly into yours, but not so much from us as consumers as a perspective, but more from the side of business. And what I want to chat about in that same vein is something called data minimization. So sounds like a big word, but essentially what it means is that data controllers, which most of us are as business people or anyone that runs a business, you're required to abide by this principle, which is the practice of collecting and processing only the personal data that you need to achieve a purpose, right? So in the same way that you want your sensitive data protected, we want to protect our passwords, our usernames, things that we input into websites to create profiles and accounts. You conversely need to protect that information if you're taking it from someone. So the aim of data minimization and what businesses should avoid is collecting unnecessary information, especially if it's sensitive. I think an important example of this in a South African context is collecting people's ID numbers or copies of their ID. If you do not need it and you can appropriately provide your services without it, then there is no need for you to collect it. It's not that it's unlawful, but it creates risk. By carrying sensitive information, you need to make sure that you've got the appropriate cybersecurity in place to protect that data. And so by only taking what you need, you reduce your risk, your vulnerability and openness to breaches, and the information that you have becomes, less risky and thereby saves you in the long run. So you need to think about it from not only your perspective, but also the perspective of people that trust you and your clients.
Brilliant, Lauren. And a lot of the tools today, like Google Workspace and definitely Microsoft 365, you can set those parameters to how long to keep customers' information and how long to retain it and delete it. So the tools are
Exactly.
already enabling the solution there. Awesome. So
100%.
my third impact practice, high impact practice, is a change in mindset. What is this mindset change? It's the always update mindset. That's how I like to think about it. What I mean, I'm always update software mindset. So remember in our first session, if you were there, we spoke about vulnerabilities or weaknesses in software. There are weaknesses and vulnerabilities everywhere in all our software, and these are the weaknesses that hackers, ransomware target specific, hackers and ransomware target specifically. And so the antidote to those vulnerabilities is an always update mindset. What I mean by that is always, whenever offered an update of your operating system, update. Whenever offered an update on an application on your phone, update. Always update your software across all your devices. Now, the interesting or the challenging thing is that the updates have a bad rap. What do I mean? Back in the day, or like 10, 15 years ago, every time you would install an update, something would break. And so people adopted this attitude that, no, every time I do an update, something breaks, and therefore I don't want to install updates. But I'm here to tell you today that times have changed. That's not the same case. Updates are so much more reliable, and there's so much more positive that comes out of an update today than negative, especially from a security perspective, but also from a functionality perspective. So I think just bringing this down to from a business perspective, in a business context, this doesn't mean just tell your users to update their software. That's not good enough. It means having a service provider to automate the process of identifying what needs to be updated and then automatically updating it across all your software, both for apps, business software, anything that runs on your devices. And this will make sure that if something is not updated and still has very serious vulnerabilities, then the service provider should intervene and manually take action. They also provide some reporting around that. So this is a huge mindset change from updates break things to always update attitude across all your devices. So that's my third high impact, security practice. What about yours, Lauren?
Perfect. So mine is probably going to be one of the things that a lawyer will always tell you. Besides, yes, that should be a contract. So it's being proactive instead of being reactive. And it ties a lot into what you've said now about having an always update mindset. And that's being proactive in making sure that the software you use, right, is the good and the best and the level that it should be. Because being proactive with compliance, and this is holistically as not only, in the data sense, but being proactive means taking initiative before it's expected of you. By doing that, you save yourself time, money, stress, and possible reputational damage. By being proactive towards your compliance, being an early adopter, taking a mindset of doing things before you need to, it means that you save yourself time, you afford yourself time and space in order to implement measures. And in that way, you're able to budget for them. When you're reactive to things and only do something when something else has happened, it often means there's higher costs involved because you're doing things on a priority or rushed basis. You might have already gotten a fine or penalty. There might already be reputational damage in the works. By being proactive, you give yourself an opportunity to do things at your own pace, at your own time, to have a mindset of making sure that things are sorted before they need to be sorted. And I thought maybe just to give a bit of a real world example on it from a data compliance perspective is when the GDPR came about, there was a lot of confusion and misunderstanding on what that means, what's going to mean for international businesses. But Microsoft, for example, took a proactive approach and it adopted the GDPR and its principles early on, not only within the EU, but holistically. And in that regard, became considered as an industry leader and it built customer trust. Conversely, one of the airlines suffered a data breach in 2018 that exposed 400,000 users' information, and then in which regard they then suffered a fine. But had the airline preemptively seen the implementation of the GDPR and put measures in place to secure data, it wouldn't have suffered, one, probably a breach of that scale, and two, the fines and not only reputational damage that it faced afterwards. So being proactive is adopting same mindset as Daniel said about keeping things afloat, keeping things good, making sure everything works beforehand and not only technically when it breaks.
Brilliant, Lauren. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end, but maybe I'm going to summarize my high impact practices. Number one is train yourself and your humans at work. Use a cybersecurity awareness training program and use phishing simulations to do that. Number two, protect your digital identities, MFA, multi-factor authentication everywhere. And number three, adopt an always update approach and make sure you have a service provider that is looking out for those vulnerabilities and taking a proactive approach. Thanks very much. A little bit about Solid. If you are interested in a free cybersecurity assessment, you're a Microsoft 365 customer, we offer that service for you and show you some of the gaps and areas, risks and areas of improvement based on your industry. We try and simplify the process for you, so feel free to book one of those on our website, solidsystems.co.za, and just book a consult. Thank you very much, Lauren. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Daniel. It's been such a pleasure to do this with you. I'm going to hand over to our wonderful CXO, Serene, but it's been a pleasure. And as always, if anyone has any questions, you want to be proactive, please, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to myself and to Daniel at Solid.
Amazing. Thank you so much, you guys. It was really informative, and I'm sure everyone is leaving here today with some really good, useful information to go implement and make sure that their data is more secure. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. I will be sending out an email, not only with the recording, but also a link to Daniel and Lauren booking pages so that you can set up a session if you want to chat to any of us. Please don't hesitate to do so. We are here to help you.